Steam.
So this is the brew house. It starts out here in the mash tun. There's a scale upstairs. Depending on the brew, we'll measure out 5,000 to 6,000 pounds of malted grain. We'll introduce it into the mash tun. We'll add water. We'll cook it at 3 different temperatures at 3 different times, and that turns the starches in the malt into fermentable sugars. Come on. Permission to come aboard, sir? Come on, okay. So this is the inside of the mash tun. It looks like we just got we're just getting ready to put another brew in there.
And all cleaned out.
In circular motion.
What do we have here?
This is the grant. This is the third part of the brewing process here. Let's go over here real quick and then I'll explain that. So from the mash tun, we pump it over here to the lauter. And you can see we're sparging it with water. You can kind of see the grain down there. I don't know if your camera will pick that up. But this is basically a strainer. What we're doing is we're separating the grain from this hot sugary liquid that we now are going to call wort. From there we move it here. So this is the grant, and this is basically our monitoring system. We don't have any computers in line, anything like that. Each of these valves goes to a different point in the lauter tun, and that's how we're able to see if there's a problem. We need to move the grain during the lauter. And then this also here, kind of get a little bit closer. This will give us a chance to take a look at the color of the wort and the sugar level of the wort.
Gotcha. Very cool.
From there, we'll move it into this vessel that Tom's working on. This is the final step. This is the brew kettle. As you can see, it's kind of pouring in here now. And now this is where we add the hops and finally bring it up to a boil. The boil will extract the oil from the hop, and it'll give us the balance. The wort's very sugary and sweet, so this will give us a balance and kind of give it a bitter flavor, or even it out a little bit. So that's the final step in the process. This is a 100-barrel system. So we do 5 brews a day, so it's 500 barrels a day. It works out roughly to be about 15,000 gallons a day that we're brewing. First brewer comes in about 5 in the morning, last brewer leaves around 11 o'clock at night. So
nice.
Here it goes around the corner of the primary.
Let's get some labs in here.
Yeah, that's just kind of where we test everything. We also send some stuff out. So from there, we'll move it to this vessel. It's very hot right now. This is the hot wort tank. We'll shoot it down at an angle. That'll create a whirlpool that'll help us get any solids that are left over in the wort, grain or crop stem, stuff like that. It'll gather at the bottom. We're easily able to scrape it out. Now, steam beer gets its name because we used to cool the beer on the rooftops in San Francisco in the mid to late 1800s. So we don't do that anymore. It takes a really long time. There's air pollution. There's things that are going to adversely affect the flavor of the beer. So we run it through the heat exchanger, which is right over there. And it works just like a radiator. There's hot water running down one side, hot water running through one of the thin vessels, cold water running through the other. And we'll cycle it through. We'll get it from a boil to 60 degrees in just about a minute. From there, we put it in these vessels. You see here, these are our cool ships. These are basically steel replicas of the fermenters that we've been using to make steam beer here in San Francisco for the last 150 years. Now this is where we'll add the yeast, and now we've combined all 4 ingredients in the beer. We've got water, grain, hops, and yeast, and now we technically have beer. These are just for making our Anchor Steam beer. Our steam beer will ferment here for 3 days at 60 degrees. What's happening is the yeast is attacking the sugars in the wort and turning the alcohol content in CO2. One of the problems with this open fermenter, though, is that you lose a lot of the CO2. It just escapes out in the air. So we're able to recover the CO2 by krausening the beer. It's a traditional conditioning technique down in the cellar. And if you guys want to go downstairs, I can show you downstairs. There's no problem. But our steam beer will sit here and ferment for 3 days before we drop it down at 60 degrees.
Is this what makes the California Common or steam beer unique versus it's a lager?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is basically like an ale process with a lager yeast. And what the problem was is in the 1800s, we didn't have mechanical refrigeration in San Francisco. We didn't have ice or snow, so we couldn't make lager. In order to lager a beer, it takes 5 to 6 weeks at 50 degrees or lower. We couldn't get it that cold. But San Francisco night air stays about 50, 55 degrees year round, so they would build these cool ships and that's what we call them. And it's just an open fermenter, and they would just put them on the roof of the building or the top floor of the building, brew during the day, and then they would pump the water up to these cool ships at night. So if you walk by a brewery in the evening time, you'd see just tons of steam coming off the tops of the buildings, and that's how steam beer got its name. Steam beer was a generic term for beer made under primitive conditions in San Francisco from the mid to late 1800s. We trademarked it when Fritz bought the company in 1965, so that's where California Common comes from. They needed a designation. But we're the last ones to still use these open fermenters. So even if there's another brewery that makes a California Common, they're not using like our traditional process here. We're the last ones in the United States to use these open fermenters to produce traditional San Francisco steam beer.
Okay. Now you're saying that the air in here is filtrated because obviously you want to. This is a similar method that they use to make wild fermentation in lambic. So obviously you want to keep all the other kind of fermentable bacteria.
We want to try to contain wild yeast, but some of it. I mean, our yeast has been cultured so much here in the building that it doesn't really. I mean, it alters probably very slowly. Also, because it's already pretty much got all the wild yeast this neighborhood's going to give up to it. But we want it to evolve also. We don't want it to be so strict that we are not able to use the open fermenter. We want the wild yeast to kind of do its thing and add in, but we definitely don't want to contaminate it with a whole other yeast stream. You know what I mean? We're able to harvest our yeast from these. So if we put, I don't really know the exact measurements, but say we put 10 gallons of yeast in here, or 10 pounds even, we'll yield 5 times that during fermentation. It'll just reproduce and grow. So we're able to harvest it too. And we want it to change, with the environment. We don't want it to be super contained, but at the same time, we don't want it to be contaminated.